is the sex here like better? Or,
Yeah.
I mean, like, let's just get honest,
Yeah.
like, or that comparison is there.
Well, I know you always say comparison's the thief of joy,
Mhm.
and I plan on enjoying sex. So, well, and I will say too, it's probably one of the most shame-ridden topics that people don't want to talk about.
Well, nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that I've heard anybody talk about sex in your second marriage. I mean, I'm sure somebody
Yeah.
has, but like, let's talk about the elephant room, because a lot of people deal with that.
Your blended family has a 100% chance of success when you do it God's way. We are Blended Kingdom Families, and we want to provide biblical resources to heal and restore families with a message of hope for the next generation.
Hey guys, welcome back to the BKF podcast. We're excited. This is going to be a juicy topic today.
Man,
We're gonna have fun.
juicy. But first,
Yes. Go ahead.
click that, what is it? The
Subscribe
subscribe
button.
button. There's a red button.
If you're cool, click the subscribe
Hit
button.
the subscribe button. You guys, we want you to be a part of our community. We put a podcast out every week, but also additional videos. So when you're a part of this community, you get notified and you can, get more content, get more encouragement
Mhm.
and support. So be sure to do that.
Yeah.
But today we're talking about
Intimacy in your second marriage. Oh,
that's a
let's
big one.
go.
Let's go.
Spoiler alert. Vanessa and I were not virgins when we got married.
No,
No, we weren't. You were married before.
Yes, I was married before, but also, I
Yeah.
made mistakes before I was married too. And so, with that and the history that we have and, the life that we have before our marriage, I mean, there were a lot of mistakes, a lot of things,
Yeah.
that we both did wrong or, that we didn't do right. I mean, we did a lot of good stuff too.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, there were a lot of those, past intimate relationships.
Yeah. Well, and I think the reason we want to talk about this, let's forecast a reason why here. So between a married couple, intimacy is really one, and we're talking about physical intimacy,
Yeah.
not the other types of intimacy. Physical intimacy is one of those things that couples, it's a very special thing for that couple,
Yeah.
for that married couple.
Yeah.
And you want it to be, kind of the pinnacle of your connection.
Yeah.
And so, but the truth of it is, and we've been married for 10 years. So I think that there's probably less questions now than we had maybe early on. But I know a lot of blended families that get into these scenarios and intimacy becomes an issue. And you're thinking, okay, well, why is it an issue?
Yeah.
And what can seep into that new marriage
Yeah.
in terms of physical intimacy because of a past marriage?
Yeah. Well, and I think, look, I think a big source or a big thing that, especially as we've coached people, you're a
Mhm.
therapist, you've seen a lot of
Mhm.
couples and blended families, there's always that comparison aspect.
Mm.
And, especially like maybe coming into the marriage, you were never married before, but now you're marrying a spouse who has been married before, has had children.
Mhm.
So, and that was our situation.
Yeah.
You're engaging with someone that your now spouse has had a physical, intimate relationship with. They have had children with
Mhm.
them. And, that can be difficult for some people. There can be, again, that comparison factor of like, well, what was that sex life like,
Yeah.
compared to this one? And, a lot of people can just have different feelings about that,
Yeah.
some insecurities with
A lot
that,
of trauma with
a
that
lot of
too.
trauma with that,
Yeah.
depending if it was like an abusive relationship,
Yeah.
like or, if there was even sexual abuse as a child,
Yeah.
I mean, that then affect, your intimate life as an adult. And so there's a lot that can go into that.
Well, and I will say too, it's probably one of the most shame-ridden topics that people don't want to talk about.
Well, nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that I've heard anybody talk about sex in your second marriage. I mean, I'm sure somebody
Yeah.
has, but like, let's talk about the elephant room, because a lot of people deal with that
Yeah.
in their second marriage.
Well, and they have an expectation that sex in their marriage is going to be great. And when issues come around,
Yeah.
it's about, where do they come from and how do you deal with it? And do you have the courage and do you have the type of marriage that, allows for those kind of conversations?
Sure.
Because a lot of times people don't. they just they won't have the freedom to bring it up. It's very, very difficult to do that. So let's talk about, you were married before,
Mhm.
so we can both share our aspects of this. But as it comes to intimacy in second marriage, kind of what are your thoughts? Like, how did you process that?
Yeah, I think that there was a previous relationship marriage before, and with that there was, the
Hmm.
different types of intimacy that we talk
Hmm.
about: physical, emotional,
Hmm.
uh financial,
Hmm.
spiritual, all of that. And so I think for me personally, I'm just speaking from my
Sure.
experience, is that, you know, that relationship was in the past,
Hmm.
that failed. And now the Lord had given me, a new opportunity,
Hmm.
and, and we're in this new marriage together. And so for me, it was a new beginning, and not letting what happened in the past affect that. And I know
Hmm.
in the beginning, we've had to work through some stuff,
Hmm.
both of us, to get to where we're at in our
Hmm.
physical relationship. And there was trauma that I experienced as a child with sexual abuse
Hmm.
that we've even had to work through.
Yeah.
And so I think it's taken a lot of patience and a lot
Hmm.
of grace, a lot of understanding,
Hmm.
and having those conversations. We've had very intimate and open and honest conversations about, like, what do you like in sex? What do you
Hmm.
not? Is there something that if I do this certain thing, is that going to trigger an
Hmm.
unwanted response?
Hmm.
Because there are things, like we talked about, like when there has been previous trauma,
Yeah.
there can be things during intercourse or foreplay or whatever that is, that you're like, oh my gosh, don't do that because it reminds me of this.
Yeah.
And it's a painful memory. And being sensitive to that, but also as a couple working through that,
Yeah.
God designed intimacy to be fun and to be pleasurable
Hmm.
and enjoyable. And that's what Eden means. Like in the Garden of Eden, Eden means pleasure. And
Yeah.
so, I think for me, it was, I had 6 years almost to, I walked through freedom and I walked through healing. And
Hmm.
as we were coming into our marriage, being in a place where, um, I had worked through as much baggage as I could,
Hmm.
so to speak. But we've been married 10 years, and there's still stuff that we're working through.
Yeah, I think, and I was just kind of reflecting on your conversation, and you look at it and you say, you know, the experiences that you've had, and let me say, both people have had experiences.
Yes.
And so both people have triggers. It can be a negative trigger. It's like, I don't like it when you do this,
Mhm.
or that bothers me. It can also be a positive trigger.
Yeah.
Like, what you like,
Yeah.
and you want that partner to do that. So there's this combination of grace, but also acceptance of saying,
Yeah.
okay, you know, my spouse likes XYZ, or whatever, you know, that may be, and my past experience with it wasn't great. So there's got to be
Mhm.
grace involved with going, okay, do you just say absolutely no, or do you say, hey, we have a conversation like, hey, this wasn't a great ending for me,
Yeah.
or this wasn't a great experience for me before. I don't want to hold that against you.
Yeah.
I don't want to hold you hostage to that. Um, and I understand it. I mean, and like we talked about, you were married. I wasn't married, but I mean, I didn't have intimacy before.
Yeah.
And so I think in my shoes, I think the only difference is, the big difference is I have a relationship with your ex-husband.
Yeah.
And so that it's not like you have a relationship with girlfriends that I dated in the past.
Sure.
So
Sure.
this is more of it's present for me.
Well, and I mean, I think that's a question for you too, Scott, is, how did that make you feel? Or was that something that you thought about often? Like,
Mm,
is Vanessa going to compare me, is our sexual experience to like her previous spouse, and because I'm sure that that is a factor for a lot of people in
mhm.
second marriages, third marriages, that, hey, like, is the sex here like better? Or,
Yeah.
I mean, like, let's just get honest,
Yeah.
like, or that comparison is there. And so I think, coming from somebody who, um, is
Yeah.
in those shoes, like, what would you say?
Well, I know you always say comparison's the thief of joy,
Hmm.
and I plan on enjoying sex. So uh, that actually never, it's really never been a thought for me.
Yeah.
I've never
Yeah.
considered it. I never, in my interactions. Never that thought never came to my mind.
Mhm.
I think it's a little bit about the maturity of it.
Sure, sure.
We got married. I was 36. If I was 22, it'd been maybe a different story. I think
Yeah.
at 36, you have a level of maturity that allows for that. Um, but I didn't compare it because I think if you're going into a blended family and maybe you're about to get married, you need to come to grips with those elements that exist
Sure.
and understand that, first I would say, and let's go the biblical side first. First, forgiveness and repentance are very real. And when you go into a new marriage, that is a new creation. And that is new for you guys. So I don't want to compare that to the past
That's good.
because it's just going to steal every bit of joy I have. And I know that people have that, like they're in the area of comparison, and it steals all the joy from their marriage. Um, I would say on the physical side, it never really occurred to me. It never occurred to me. I don't know why it didn't. I will say this on the comparison side. I think they're worth the elements that you and I had to work through in terms of saying, we had to learn what each other liked, and I
Mhm.
think that there's an acceptance there and saying, okay, does it have to be X, Y, Z, or is there any changes or anything different? And that just comes with conversations. And I will tell you guys, which is just completely odd to me, in marriage, you can have this crazy, transparency in everything except sex.
Yeah.
It's like the minute you have to have like the right temperature to talk about sex in a marriage, because you don't want to come across as defensive.
Yeah.
You don't want to come across as like, to be honest, like maybe you're too weird. Maybe you have some weird things. You're like,
Yeah.
but the temperature's got to be right.
Well, and I think in seasons, we've been married 10 years, like sexes look different in different
Hmm.
seasons over the years,
Yeah.
and for some people, I love Dave and Ashley Willis. You guys, if you've been listening and following us for a while, y'all know Dave and Ashley. They're a part of Exo Marriage.
Hmm.
We love this marriage ministry, but we call
Hmm.
them the sex-perts because
Yeah.
they are the hosts of the Naked Marriage podcast. And one thing that Dave and Ashley have spoken about is different season and different chairs. And
Hmm.
so you may be in one season where like quickies are all that you can get in because your kids are always banging on your door. they're
Hmm.
they're interrupting your time. But then you may be in a season where like you're empty nesters. And so
You can
you're
walk around naked.
walking around the house naked and you can enjoy it and you can do it in every room of the house. Like
Yeah.
that's awesome. But then you may be in another season where like it's few and far in between
Yeah.
because you've had a lot of maybe tragedy or grief, or there's elements that have
Hmm.
played into that. And so and being patient in that process. But whether no matter what season you're in, having those honest conversations of
Hmm.
like, hey, this is where I'm at right
Yeah.
now. And just being able to be transparent and vulnerable and open with your spouse about that.
Well, and that's where I think a lot of the past in past marriages that trauma enters in is there's a healthy place to do that. And then you see these situations where when sex becomes a problem in a marriage, sometimes that's the default.
Sure.
It's like the default is let's go back to your trauma. Let's go back to, is it comparison? Is it, whatever that, you know, reason may be, but you've left the space of healthy communication vacant, and you just went back to maybe a kind of a gut shot reaction
Sure.
of what you're used to, or maybe in your previous marriage sex was used as a weapon, and it was not something that was enjoyed, and
Yeah.
there's a reason that marriage failed,
Yeah.
and so that sits in your mind.
Yeah.
I know we've talked to a lot of couples who've had, been through previous marriages of affairs, and trust is a big issue. So, and I think what we're talking to here, and really what we're kind of alluding to, is those couples who are, kind of newly married, or maybe in that first like 3 to 4 years, it becomes an issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and I think what if any encouragement we could give today, I think it's just having those conversations. If you're in a season where you're in like a rut, so to
Hmm.
speak, and you're like, hey, sex is few and far in between. I don't know that my spouse is enjoying it, or, you know, you're stuck in that comparison, like
Hmm.
with, your spouse's previous marriage. It could be a mirage of things,
Hmm.
whatever that may be. You guys, we just want to encourage that you sit down and you have the conversation
Hmm.
and talk about what you like talk about what you don't,
Mhm.
what are some new things you want to
Yeah.
try, or what excites you? Because again, God intended for sex to be amazing and
Mhm.
for it to be pleasurable and for it to be fun. And so, um, you know, having that conversation, it's important.
Well, marriage is supposed to be fun, guys, and I think we make it real serious all the time.
Hmm.
And that's just, and blended families do it twice as bad. They just make it really serious. It's
Yeah.
it's always it's very, and God did make sex to be fun
Hmm.
and enjoyable, and make babies if you want to. I mean, if that's your season, make them. What did I say the other day? I had a good dad joke the other day. I was like, funnest thing about kids is making them. Oh, the funnest thing. The funnest thing about kids is getting to play in the box they came in. Uh, so yeah, if you get to play, because you kids, the reference is you give them a toy and they play with the box. Yeah. So the funnest thing about having kids is getting to play in the box they came in. And I think it should be fun, but I also want to be in the serious side of it is if you were married before, if you're in a relationship, this idea can affect your intimacy,
Yeah.
and you just don't want to do that. Why let the thief of comparison steal your joy and what God's created for you? I don't think you should. And I love that you mentioned, Dave and Ashley. I think even right now, they're doing a great, series on sex and intimacy, and
It's like 14 days of sex.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
It's
love
awesome.
it. And one of our favorite pastors, Jimmy Evans. I mean, he spoke one time on this, and he said, what's allowed in the bedroom and what
Yeah.
can be. And he's like, as long as it's safe and it's, your partners agree. And then he goes like, if that's it, put your Superman costume on and go at it.
Yeah.
So I have I don't have a Superman costume, but I'll wear a costume if that's your thing. I have no shame in my game. But I'm just glad that we're, just having a conversation. And I hope that if you're out there and you're like, we've never talked about this,
Yeah.
um, I dare you to ask your spouse hard questions.
Yeah.
Like, get out there and be like, hey, do you ever think about this? Because I don't want it to be something you think about.
Yeah.
I know up until this topic came up, you and I have never talked about that. Like,
Hmm.
do you ever compare sex, or do you ever think that
Yeah.
that's a comparison?
Yeah.
It's just something that hasn't come up.
Hmm.
So,
And it could be one spouse has thought about it and they just haven't even voiced it. And
mm,
maybe that in itself is then causing issues, like unknowing issues, so
yeah.
to speak. So, you guys, if you're wrestling with that, we'd encourage you to talk to your spouse. And if you just really don't even know where to begin, that's where we always talk about like finding a biblical counselor. Talking to
Mhm.
somebody about this is can be a great first step to helping you and your spouse process through whatever it may be. If it's difficulty with sexual intimacy,
Mhm.
or dealing from things from the past, from your previous marriage, that's affecting your sexual intimacy. But we hope you guys have enjoyed the podcast today. You guys, you can go to our YouTube channel and hit the subscribe button so you can be notified every time we
Mm.
have a podcast come out. Also, visit our website at blendedkingdomfamilies.com. If you are looking for coaching or
Mm.
mentoring, we have some amazing coaches who would love to partner with you in your marriage, your blended family, whatever that may be. Check out our website to get more information on that. Or if you would like to join in a community group, online group, we have those as well. Just visit us at blendedkingdomfamilies.com, and we'll see you next week. Be blessed in all that you do.
You guys take care.
Hey friends, so glad you were here with us today, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can find more resources from Blended Kingdom Families at blendedkingdomfamilies.com. Join us again next time as we talk about more blended family topics. Be blessed in all that you do, and remember, nothing will be impossible with God.